This morning, the ongoing fallout of the ADFA Skype scandal and the implications for the military into the future, with more than 700 plausible allegations of abuse emerging throughout this process, and with more allegations undoubtedly expected to emerge over coming weeks and months. I spoke to the Defence Minister, Stephen Smith, a bit earlier in the morning, and I began by asking him why have the ADFA inquiry in the first place if he's not going to accept all of the inquiry's findings.
Well, I do accept the findings, and the findings provide no legal basis for Commander Kafer to not go back to ADFA, and that's what's occurring. But people need to clearly understand where this started. It started with the innocent victim of an alleged sexual abuse from which criminal proceedings have flown, and my very strong view that it's inappropriate to bring the character or the conduct of the innocent victim of an alleged sexual abuse into play, and that's what occurred. Now, Kirkham found, as the Chief of the Defence Force and I said yesterday, that the decision by Commander Kafer to proceed or to allow the disciplinary proceedings to continue was appropriate. He also found that a different decision maker could have taken an entirely different view, in other words, stopped the unrelated disciplinary proceedings, and that it was unfortunate that Commander Kafer did not discuss the disciplinary proceedings with the 18-year-old cadet and her officer representing her.
So Kirkham found it was appropriate that the Commodore pursued the disciplinary matters, but you described it as inappropriate, insensitive, completely stupid, and almost certainly faulty at law. There's a very big divergence there, isn't there? Well, either you're wrong or Kirkham's wrong.
Well, as I say, Kirkham said that the decision that Commander Kafer made was appropriate, but equally a different decision maker could have made a different decision.
But he said it wasn't an error of judgment, and you clearly believe it was. Well, so who's wrong here? Is Kirkham wrong?
I accept absolutely the findings of the Kirkham inquiry, which provide no legal basis to prevent Commander Kafer from returning to ADFA. That's the decision that the Chief of the Defence Force has made. But I absolutely stand by the comments I made at the time, which I repeated yesterday effectively and repeat today, that it is wrong in principle when you're dealing with an 18-year-old innocent victim of an alleged serious sexual assault to bring her character and conduct into play.
Okay,
now,
so that's your view. But Kirkham says there was no error of judgment. So is the QC wrong in that finding, in your view? Because you clearly disagree with him.
Kirkham, well, I accept the findings, firstly. Secondly, Kirkham also says...
You can't accept the finding that there's no error of judgment, and then you stand by the suggestion that it was inappropriate, insensitive. They're not compatible.
Well, I have a strong view that it's wrong in principle to bring the character of the innocent victim of an alleged sexual assault into play. It takes us back to the bad old days in Australia where people were allowed to bring the character of the victim into play and make suggestions, it was all her fault. Now, that's my strong view.
So Kirkham's wrong then, in his suggestion that there's no error of judgment?
Well, Kirkham says three things. He says that the decision by Commander Kafer to allow the proceedings to continue was appropriate. He also says that a different decision maker could have made an entirely different decision, namely stop the proceedings, and that it was unfortunate that there wasn't a discussion between Kafer and the officer cadet.
What more can he do, though?
Just let me finish. And there wasn't a discussion between Kafer and the officer cadet about the proceedings continuing. Clearly, if that discussion had taken place, what the Kirkham inquiry is hinting at is that there may have been a conversation which saw those proceedings stop. Now, I accept the findings. The Chief of the Defence Force, after discussion with me and the Secretary, has made a decision to send Commander Kafer back. I said yesterday that one of the considerations we took into account was there are risks associated with that, risks that the controversy will follow the commander, risks that the controversy will follow ADFA, and risks to...
Well, what about him,
reputation.
though? Because you criticised him. His career is on hold for 1 year. The inquiry exonerates him. Still no apology.
how do you, as far as how he feels, what do you think, what else can he do?
Well, firstly, he was placed on leave by the Vice Chief of the Defence Force, now the Chief of the Defence Force, who made it clear yesterday that it would have been unsustainable to have an inquiry into the events at ADFA with him remaining at the helm. So that was the decision made by his commanding officer.
But did you feel for him? Because he's had his career on hold. You're not apologising. Well, you're not even expressing confidence in him.
Well, I have absolute confidence in the Chief of the Defence Force and the Vice Chief of the Defence Force to make these decisions. But look, I feel for all of the players in this matter. Let's just stand back. We've had an incident at ADFA. We've got an 18-year-old victim of an alleged serious sexual assault. She hasn't been at ADFA since April of last year. She's now at a defence establishment in Brisbane. Her career has been placed effectively on hold as well, and she's been so upset, as you would expect, by these matters that she wasn't in a position to give evidence herself to the Kirkham inquiry. We've got 2 young cadets, one of whom has left the force, subject to serious criminal charges. The second one remains at ADFA. We've got 4 young cadets at ADFA who may well face the prospect of disciplinary proceedings after those criminal trials have been heard. So this has not been a happy incident for all concerned.
Is there anything in the report, because you're not releasing it in its entirety, just to clear it up for people that would suggest you're not doing that because there's criticisms of you, because that has been suggested around the place. Well, do you reject that?
Well, absolutely, and I said yesterday that the Kirkham inquiry is not an inquiry into me. It doesn't deal with me.
Are there any adverse findings? No criticisms of you?
There is no mention of me in the report. It's not a report about me.
Well, let's move on, because there's a few other issues and big issues. 775 plausible allegations of abuse. Likely to be many more, aren't there?
Well, it's an important point that you've now gone to, because without the controversy over Skype and ADFA and the young cadet Kate, we would not have seen the outpouring of allegations to me, to the media, to defence. One of the initiatives after the ADFA controversy was to send all of those allegations to the law firm DLA Piper to assess them independently. Now, the advice I have, which I released yesterday, was that of the original 1,000 allegations, over 700 are within the terms of reference, and over 700 are said to be plausible allegations of serious sexual or other abuse in defence over a period from the 1950s until as late as last year. Now, this is a very significant challenge for defence and the government to deal with when I get the final report by the end of this month.
Would your preference be for a Royal Commission to deal with this once and for all, rather than other options that might see it roll out for years and years and years?
Well, yesterday I put out the various options that DLA Piper had suggested as part of their first report, ranging from relying upon existing procedures to compensation under the defence arrangements, to judicial inquiry or a Royal Commission or some form of apology or reconciliation tribunal. All of those options have to be on the table.
There's just a couple of issues. I know you've got to get going. You've faced a lot of criticism from the defence community. Does this reflect an increasingly dysfunctional relationship that you've got with defence, or do you wear it as a badge of honour that you're standing up to them? Because clearly, in the past, defence have dominated their ministers.
Well, firstly, I have a very good and close working relationship with the Chief of the Defence Force, the Vice Chief of the Defence Force, the Service Chiefs and the Secretary.
So you know there's a lot of criticism of you within defence.
Well, people should not take the comments from people who are outside the Defence Force, who are not part of the leadership of the Defence Force, should not take those comments and criticisms and ascribe them to the current leadership.
Okay. Well, so you don't think that it's a reality more broadly within defence, that people are angry at you, they feel that you had hung Kafer out to dry?
Well, people are entitled to their opinions, but
a lot of people in defence.
People should not take the views of commentators and ascribe them to the views of the leadership of the Defence Force.
One last issue, a very sad issue. 6 British soldiers killed in an explosion in the Helmand province. What does this say about where things are at in Afghanistan? If these attacks, one of the worst for British forces in the operation, continue?
Well, it's a terrible incident. Last night I asked our High Commissioner in London to relay my personal condolences to my British Defence counterpart, Philip Hammond. It's a terrible explosion. We've known that the IED danger, the roadside bomb danger in Afghanistan remains a very high danger, but the comments from my British counterpart overnight are the same as mine, which is we're on track for transition in Afghanistan to hand over to Afghan-led security responsibility by 2014. In our case, in Oresgon perhaps earlier. The key thing is to hand the job to the Afghan National Security Forces. We don't want to be there forever, and we're on track to do that.
Minister, appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks very much.